Picture this. You are standing on a barren landscape that is desolate, other than a handful of plants and animals that are adapted to survive there. You may be imagining something like the Sahara Desert, one of the hottest and largest deserts on Earth. But across all the continents, there are regions that regularly experience long periods without rainfall. There, you will see a variety of animals and plant species specially adapted to survive in those arid conditions. In contrast, when low precipitation leads to arid conditions in areas that it shouldn't, we call this a drought. This refers to an extended period of low rainfall that leads to a shortage of water, affecting both surface and groundwater supplies. This phenomenon is happening more frequently across North America. In fact, in 2021, Canada experienced one of the worst droughts in history, resulting in farmers not being able to maintain their animals or protect their crops, leading to economic losses and fears about food security. Let's explore the causes of drought in various regions, the difference between natural and atypical drought, how it impacts our food system, and what we can do to combat it. As I mentioned, drought refers to an extended period of dry conditions due to low or no precipitation. This results in a shortage of water, but drought looks different depending on the normal precipitation levels for each region. There are several different types of drought, including meteorological, hydrological, agricultural, socioeconomic, and ecological drought. Each of these droughts are named based on the impacts they have. For example, ecological drought occurs when natural ecosystems are affected by a lack of rain. In an agricultural drought, crops and farming practices are hindered by a lack of water. While some of these drought types can occur independent of others, they usually occur together depending on the natural landscape and water demands for a region. To some degree, drought is felt in Canada each year in the summer. But while it may be natural for the prairies to experience periods of drought during the summer months, the same conditions occurring in the wet coast of British Columbia are very unnatural. When we think about drought, many of us hold the common misconception that it occurs after a period of no rain at all. Though this is possible, drought conditions typically are cumulative, starting slowly with lighter amounts of rain or snow over a period of several months or years. It is aptly named the creeping phenomenon because over time, low precipitation leads to low stream flows in rivers and lakes, potentially killing plants and animals and affecting agriculture and commerce in the region. Many factors, such as the annual climate oscillations, El Niño and La Niña, which are changes in sea surface temperatures that impact global weather patterns, alter the risk and severity of drought. Let's look at the Canadian prairies as an example. Though 2021 presented a severe and damaging drought, periods of low precipitation are actually normal for this region. Many plants and animals have adapted to these conditions, including the sweet and nutty-tasting Saskatoon berry, which thrives there. While such drought can have negative consequences for the region, it has largely been a natural occurrence experienced over hundreds of years. But in recent decades, droughts have become longer and harsher due to climate change, even occurring in regions where drought is not normal. Anthropogenic, meaning human-caused, climate change affects stable global climatic conditions by altering how much rain falls, when it falls, and where it falls, as well as changing expected air temperatures. Irregular rainfall patterns and warmer than usual surface temperatures are the ideal conditions for drought. Combine this with local plants that are not adapted to drought conditions, overused agricultural land, and high urban and industrial water demands, and the situation can get out of control very quickly. When dealing with the complexity of climate and changes in weather patterns, figuring out if something is a worrying change or part of a normal cycle of climate is quite difficult. Scientists have to consider various indicators across long periods of time, across local and global scales, to understand if changes in climate are natural or driven by climate change from human activity. While the most obvious place to look for clues is at historical weather data, other indicators such as groundwater levels, ice cores, changes in flora and fauna, and relying on historical accounts and local knowledge are all parts of a very complex but important puzzle. Figuring out if drought conditions in a region are natural or driven by climate change can provide decision makers with context on how to address the problem in the most efficient way. So, how can we tell if drought is normal for a region or an atypical weather event caused by climate change? As I mentioned, the most scientific way to answer this question is to look at historical weather data, including rainfall and temperature patterns, and other indicators such as snowpack depths and stream flows. This information is fed to complex computer models that analyze the data over various time frames to expose patterns. Here we may see a natural drought occur every 10 or 100 years historically, but in the past 3 to 4 decades, see those drought conditions are now occurring every 1 to 3 years. This massive shift in regular weather and stream flow data suggests that something abnormal is occurring. To decide the cause of these changes, these patterns must be cross-referenced with data on local water demands, changes in the local natural environment, and international data on greenhouse gases and climate change. Now that we understand what drought is, let's explore how drought, natural or atypical, can impact our food system. Globally, agriculture is the largest consumer of water. This means that farms and other parts of the food system are the first to feel the impact of drought and often end up being the hardest hit. Due to the importance of maintaining food supplies, drinking water is often diverted from local communities to nourish crops, which poses threats to some of the most vulnerable populations across the world. These people are the ones who are already suffering the most from climate change and weather challenges, including limitations to their diet, which can cause degenerative disease and deficiencies, affecting all aspects of their lives. While the situation isn't as severe here in Canada, drought has had other impacts on communities across the country. This was especially the case in 2021, when heat waves and drought affected many parts of the Prairies in British Columbia. In British Columbia, drought affected many island communities who rely on local streams and rivers for agriculture and drinking water. In other regions, drought and high temperatures affected farmers' ability to care for livestock, leading to herd culls. Others reported prized regional fruit crops being cooked while still on the trees. The scorching temperatures and water shortages caused devastating income losses in agricultural communities across the province. On the opposite coast, the Canadian Drought Monitor noted that 99% of agricultural land in the prairies was abnormally dry or in a drought situation during the summer months. Without sufficient water for crop irrigation, plants died, resulting in overall national yield declines of 35% for canola, 38% for wheat, 35% for barley, and 40% for oat. These crop losses resulted in lower income for farmers, food shortages for livestock, resulting in herd kills, and even reduced national GDP. Yikes! To add to this, the impacts of drought go beyond their direct effect on growing food. Drought is a serious economic stressor that increases the price of food, which ultimately affects consumers like you. While some of us can afford a few dollar increases in our weekly shopping bill, this has severe impacts on low-income families and those already living in poverty. In addition, with less access to healthy, unprocessed foods, many will suffer physical and mental health consequences, even losing touch with their identity and culture as they are unable to access the ingredients of their native dishes. Despite millions living in food poverty and climate change-amplified drought gripping the North American continent, our experience of drought pales in comparison to developing countries across the African and Asian continents. Many countries across these regions are suffering immensely from drought and other weather events made worse by the changing climate. Locals in these regions are particularly vulnerable to drought due to geography and dependence on subsistence agriculture, where families grow their own food. Droughts can have fatal consequences here, as crop failures are not subsidized by food imports from local governments. Historically, many regions across Africa and Asia have suffered severe famine caused by drought. This can even be seen today with famine and drought raging across nations in Eastern Africa, including Kenya. While drought is a scary phenomenon, We can find comfort in the fact that we already have a lot of knowledge and tools needed to mitigate it and reduce its impacts on our global communities. We must transform our view of water to recognize the limits of this life-giving liquid. By recognizing that the agri-food sector is the biggest consumer of water globally, we can take action on both a systemic and individual level to protect this precious resource. At home, we can make climate-smart food choices by eating foods that have a low environmental and water footprint, including more vegetables, fruits, legumes, and whole grains, while reducing or cutting out meat and dairy. We can also practice zero food waste at home. On a larger scale, we can pressure decision makers to directly address the causes of drought, to build better water management systems, and to diversify our foods, such as transitioning from farmed meat and dairy to sustainable alternatives like plant-based proteins and cultivated meat and dairy. For more tips on how to eat a climate-friendly diet, reduce your food waste, or get involved with our Cultivated Meat campaign, check out our guide in the description. Thanks for watching our series on drought. Reimagine Agriculture is a nonprofit organization working to transform the food system. You can support our work by directly donating via the link in the description. You can also support our work by liking this video, leaving a comment, or sharing it with your friends and family. Be sure to sign up to our newsletter and follow our social media accounts linked in the description. And of course, check out the second video of our series here.